So welcome everybody, as Matthew said, to our session today on using Microsoft Excel. Just so you know, I will be using the desktop version, and of course I'm in the Microsoft 365 desktop app. So let me open up the practice file that was put out into the chat for you. And what I want to start with here today is really kind of talking about some benefits that we have with using Excel that I feel are things that everyone should be aware of, things that I use on a very regular basis. And the first one is called named ranges. Named ranges is a feature built into Excel that allows us to select a cell or range of cells, so multiple cells, and give it an actual name. Now, the benefits to actually doing that is the range will be uniquely identified by the name that you give it, and it becomes an absolute reference by default, and it will make it quicker and easier to refer to that same range if you're doing formulas and different things with it. I could go on for about 15 minutes talking about the benefits of using named ranges, and there's even features beyond our session today that take advantage of named ranges. But let's see some first guidelines as to how we name a range. The first thing to keep in mind is named ranges cannot have any spaces in the name. We do have multiple ways to create the names, and I'll show you a couple of those options here today. But the big thing is the no spaces, but it also cannot start with specific characters. You'll see those in your list of guidelines in your handout. It can be up to 255 characters long, but shorter is probably a little bit better because once that length gets pretty long, it's kind of hard to get to those or remember what the names are sometimes. So it is best if you kind of keep them short and sweet, but you want them to be able to identify the name of whatever the content of the cell is. So it's very important to make sure you name it appropriately. So first, I happen to be on the worksheet called References. And what I want to do is be able to create a formula in column G. And I want to be able to use the commission rate, which is on cell G2. But I want it to be an absolute reference so I can copy the formula down for the other employees in this list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to cell G2. So I'm going to click on the cell that I want to name. If you look at the name box at the top left of the window, it says G2 because that always identifies the cell you're actively on. You can actually click in that box and type the name that you want to give to that cell. I want to call it commission rate because that's what it is. So I'm going to use uppercase, lowercase text. Sometimes you'll see people use an underscore to separate words, but I'm simply going to put in commission and then a capital R for rate. I'm not using any spaces. After you type a name in, you can simply press enter, and it will automatically have that cell now be referred to commission rate. So one of the big benefits was that is now an absolute reference, so we don't have to use the dollar signs in a formula to reference that cell and copy it down. So let me show you an example of that. If I go to G5, I want to create a formula that's going to calculate the commission rate for each of the salespeople based on their total sales. I'm going to do equal F5 asterisk, and I'm going to click G2. When I click on cell G2, it automatically brings in the name of that cell, commission rate. I'm going to do Control Enter to complete the formula, but stay on that cell. And I will see when I look at the formula, it's much easier to understand what the formula is actually doing. So that's another benefit of naming ranges. So you can see that it says F5 multiplied by commission rate. The formula just makes more sense. And because it is a named range that I'm using, I can copy my formula down for the other employees, and each one of them will say commission rate. So great way to utilize that feature called named ranges. But I want to do one more example on this same sheet. I'm going to actually go to cell H4. I'm going to give this cell a name, and I'm going to say sales goal reached. And I'm going to put a question mark. So I want to create in column H a formula that's going to help us know if each one of the salespeople met their sales goal. So on cell G1 is what everybody's sales goal is. It's $6,500. And if you look at column F, I want to compare if their total in column F is greater than or equal to the sales goal. And if it is, I wanted to say the word yes. But if they didn't reach their sales goal, in column H, I wanted to say the word no. The function we're going to use to do this is called if. If you haven't used this function yet, this is one of my favorites, something that I use on a weekly basis, sometimes daily basis. So I'm going to start first by naming cell G1. I want to name it sales goal because I want to use it in a formula column H and use it as an absolute reference so I can copy it down for the other employees. So what I'm going to do is show you another way to name a range of cells. I can select F1 and G1. I want to use the text in F1 to name the cell in G1. I can now go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon, which is where you will find a group called Defined Names. This is where we go to manage all of our named ranges by using the Name Manager. That will show you every named range within the workbook. That's where you could edit them. That's where you could delete them, whatever it is that you might need to do. But what I want to use right now is called Create from Selection. So I'm going to click Create from Selection. It opens up this little dialog box and it understands that there was text in the left column of what I selected. So it has a check mark in front of left column. It's going to use the text in that left column to name the cell on the right. All I have to do is click OK. Now, how do I know that that just worked? Well, if you go to the name box, I happen to be clicked on cell I-10 right now. If I go to the name box, it says I-10. But if I click on that drop-down arrow, I can see every named range within this workbook. If I click sales goal from that drop-down list, it's going to automatically take me to that cell called sales goal. That's another benefit. We can use named ranges to navigate throughout the workbook. Pretty cool. But anyway, let me use it in a formula. I'm going to go to H5 and I'm going to start with equal the letter I. It's the if function that I want to use, so I'm going to press my tab key or I could double click on it. You can see from the screen tip underneath it, first it's looking for the logical test, then it's going to be looking for what value I want if that logical test is true, and then what do I want if that logical test is false. If you're not quite sure what you're supposed to do, my recommendation is go to the formula bar, click on the FX icon. That's in the formula icons area, click FX. That will open up what is called the function arguments window. What that allows you to do is break apart the arguments of the formula. And if you need help, there's a shortcut down at the bottom, a link to get help on this function. So it's super easy to use this. I call it my helper window. I use it anytime that I personally don't want to add other entities to my formula also. Because every time you create a formula with multiple arguments, you have to put a comma to separate the arguments. And if you're creating a formula that has text in it, like this one, it's going to have the answer of yes or no. It needs quotes around the text. I don't want to type it in. Because I'm in the function arguments window, it will do that for me, all those extra things. So what it wants first is the logical test. That's where my cursor is blinking. What I want it to do is to look at F5 and see if it is greater than or equal to G1. If I click G1, it automatically puts the name of that cell, sales_goal, which is what it named it a minute ago. I'm going to click in the value if true, which by the way, on the right-hand side, you can see this one is already true. If you go to the value if true, we want it to say yes. Value if false, we want it to say no. Notice that it automatically is adding the quotes around yes. It will also add it around no once we click OK. So basically what this formula is doing is saying if F5 is greater than or equal to the sales goal, if it's true, it's going to say yes. But if it's false, it will say no. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to say the word yes. Because, of course, when you look at it, it is greater than or equal to that 6,500. We can copy this formula down because the sales goal was an absolute reference because it was a named range. We can copy it down for the other employees. So the if function along with the named range was a super easy way for us to be able to analyze that data. But let's use a couple of other examples with this. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Employee Departments. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Employee Departments. And I'm going to do a couple of other if functions with you right now. And what I want to do is go to G2, H2, and I2 and create a couple of other ifs. So if functions are basically, if something is true, do this. But if it's false, whatever this is, do this instead. So it always works based on true or false. Well, the one that I'm going to do on G2 is a sum if. What I actually want to do is starting in row 5 is a list of employees for this organization. And what I wanted to do is to look at the salary. And if the salary is 60,000 or more, so if it's greater than or equal 60,000, I wanted to add it together. But I only want it to do it no, this one I think I'll do this way. I'm going to change my mind on what I want for the answer. Let's say instead, I want it to look at the salary column, add all the salaries together, but only if the department is marketing. The department column, if they're in the marketing department, I want it to add together all the salaries. So that will be our goal. So what I want to do is name the ranges for department and salary so that I can actually use that named range in my formula. But what if I also want to do formulas that are going to be based on other things? I can select whatever cells I'm going to actively be using. So I'm going to select department, data hire, degree, salary, because maybe I want to do named ranges for all of those because I'm going to use them in different formulas. I can select the range of cells, including the headings at the top for each of those columns. I'm going to go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon, click Create from Selection, and it thinks I want the text on the left and the heading at the top to name cells. I don't want the left column. I want to use the top row of my selection to name each of the columns going down. Once I have just top row selected, I can click OK. Now I have named ranges for the department, the data hire, the degree, the salary. To show you, if I go to the name box, click on the drop down, you can see those listed. Like if I click department, it's going to select everything in that department column. But let's use those in a formula now. I'm going to go to G2 and I want it to sum a range of cells that matches a criteria. So if it's true, it's going to add numbers together. I'm going to do equal SU, double click on sum if. I'm going to double click on sum if. It's looking for what is the range we want to evaluate. That's going to be the department. We want to look at the department column. So I'm going to type DE. It's going to bring up a list of items that start with DE, which, as you can see from my drop-down list, I can see formulas, I should say functions, These are function names that have the circle with the FX, but the ones that have the squares with the blue, those are named ranges. If I double click department, it selects the range that refers to department. So I don't have to keep going back and selecting it. And what it wants next after my comma is it wants to know what is the criteria. The criteria is going to be marketing. Marketing needs to be in quotes, but it doesn't care if it's uppercase, lowercase, it's not case sensitive. I'm going to type marketing surrounded by quotes. Then I'm going to put in a comma for the last argument, which the last argument is the sum range. So right now it's going to look at the range called department. The criteria is the name, marketing. The range I wanted to add together is salary. If I type the letter S, it will show salary right away at the top. I'm going to press my tab key. It adds salary in. So basically, I'm saying evaluate the department column. If it says marketing, add together all the salaries just for marketing. I'm going to control enter. It automatically added those together. So basically, it went to every place it says marketing, went over to the column for salary, and started adding all these salaries together. Okay, so just so you can see, the answer down here in my total matches the answer that I got up here when I selected those cells. So great, quick way to do that, especially if somebody changes to a different department, the formula, of course, is automatically going to update. I'm going to show you also on H2, cell H2, how to use a function called COUNTIF. Sometimes when you're in Excel, you may want to count a range of cells based on criteria. The COUNTIF counts based on whatever criteria it is that we give it. So we say, this is the range that I want you to look at. Here's what the criteria is, and it just counts the cells that contain that item. So we wanted to, let's say we wanted to count the departments. We want to know how many people are in the marketing department. So where that sum if came in play, how many people made up those numbers. We're going to do equal COU to narrow the list down of functions. Double click the function called COUNTIF. It only has a range and a criteria for the arguments. The range is going to actually be the department. So if I type DE, I can then double click department. So I don't have to keep going back and selecting that range again and again and again and again. I can just use the named range. I'm going to put in a comma. It wants to know what the criteria is. I'm going to do quote marketing quote. So basically we're saying, look at the department column, count how many times it says marketing. Pretty easy. I'm going to do control enter, and it will automatically tell me there's 4 people in the marketing department. Now, of course, let's say that one of these people moved to the marketing department. If I change somebody's department, it will automatically update both those formulas. So I like these if type functions, and it's great that they work with the other functions like sum, if, and then we're going to do an average. So on I2, on cell I2, I'm going to do another if, but it's going to be an average if, where I want it to look for that sales department again. I should say marketing. If it says marketing for the department, I wanted to go to the salary and give us an average of all the salaries. So basically it will be the salaries of those 5 people. So we're going to do an equal AV to narrow the list of functions down. You can double click on average if. Double click average if. You can see that the criteria, or I should say the arguments, are actually the same as if we were doing a sum if. It has 3 arguments. So it's looking for what is the range we want it to evaluate. That's going to be the department. So if I put in department, comma, The criteria is the word marketing, comma, the range of cells I wanted to get an average of is going to be the salary. So if I type the letter S, I can press my tab key, it will automatically add salary. I'm going to control enter, and when you're looking at this in the formula bar, when you are on that cell of that formula, it's a lot easier to understand what is this formula doing by having those named ranges. So we can see it's doing an average. If the department is marketing, it's going to give us the average of the salaries. So by using these named ranges, it's much easier to understand our formulas, not just for us, but for anybody else that is going to be looking at these formulas as well. So wanted to give you just a couple of ideas as to how you could take advantage of using these functions called if. These are going to be probably the most commonly used. But we have a couple of other functions that are very common as well. One of them is actually called a VLOOKUP. A VLOOKUP allows us to look up information based on a criteria. So, and this is in your handout as well, starting on page 5. The VLOOKUP stands for vertical. It's going to look vertically across a range of data to find what we need. I have some things already set up in rows 1 and 2 under employee ID number, and B2, I have one of the ID numbers from this employee list. And what we want to do is find the last name of that person that has that employee ID number. So let's say that I need to know the name that matches this employee ID number because I found their badge, but it didn't have their picture or their name on it, or I need to look it up for whatever reason. And I say, well, what's their employee ID number? I could have it automatically populate using formulas to tell me what is their last name, their first name, their department, their data hire, whatever information it is that I have. It can automatically look it up within this data source starting on row 5. So we have to have a unique ID to look up. So the employee ID number, no two employees have the same ID number. So that's a good one to look up. If I looked up a first name, there's a lot of people that could have the same first name. So basically what I'm going to do on cell C2 is use a VLOOKUP. I'm going to do equal the letter V. I'm going to double click VLOOKUP. Now, when you look at the arguments in that screen tip, it has a lookup value, which our lookup value is going to be employee ID. That's B2. So I'm going to click cell B2. That's our lookup value. I'm going to put in a comma to separate the arguments, and it wants to know the table array. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying range of cells. So what is the range of cells? I'm going to find that employee ID and find the answer I'm looking for. So it needs the range of information. And whatever we're looking up has to be the first column. So what we want to do is select, and I'm just going to select B6 from over to I6. I'm going to do B6 to I6. But I need to go all the way to the bottom of this list. So I'm going to do Shift Control down arrow. Shift Control down arrow will select everything going down from what I had selected across. So now I have this big range of data selected, so it knows this is where it's going to find the information. I'm going to put in a comma. The next argument is called the column index number. What that really is based on this range that I just selected, what is the column that has the answer I'm looking for? We have to count the columns going across. The employee ID is the first column. The department is the second column. Data hire is the third. Degree is fourth. Then we have salary, then last name. That's the sixth column across. So the column ID is 6. By counting those across. I'm going to do Control Enter, and it automatically found the last name for that person with that ID number. Every time we change to a different ID number, it will search through our data source and find the matching last name. I personally don't use this function as much as I used to. It used to be my go-to function for looking things up in a range, but I don't use it anymore because we do have a new function that works smarter than the VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP is a horizontal lookup. Microsoft now has what is called an XLOOKUP. The XLOOKUP allows us to look within a specific column. We don't have to select the table array and then count the columns across. It works smarter than that. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to actually go to D2 and I'm going to do an XLOOKUP. I want to find the first name of that employee ID number, but instead I'm using an X instead of a V. So I'm going to do equal the letter X. I'm going to double click the XLOOKUP. The XLOOKUP actually has more arguments. I won't get into all the arguments today. It's got some really great features, though you want to check it out, and I gave you a bunch of information in your handout. But just to give you an introduction to it today, I want my lookup value, my first argument is lookup value, is going to be B2, just like the other one, comma, it wants to know what is the lookup array. Instead of having to select that big range of data and then count the columns across, it just wants to know what is the column that has the value you want me to look up. That's going to be B6 down through B52. Now, of course, I should have named that range. So I could have just called it employee ID instead of having to select it. But it's going to look in B6 through B52 to find that employee ID number. The next argument that it's looking for is going to be, B2. I clicked on a different cell. Sorry, totally my fault. Let me go back and fix this. Sorry. I got to have it be 6 all the way down to B52. Sorry. So the lookup value was B2, comma, the range of cells I wanted to find that lookup value was B6 through B52. Now it wants to know what's the column that's going to give us the answer. That's going to be the last name column. I'm going to go ahead and, did I name that range? No, I did not. So I have to select that range. So I'm going to click on B6, or that, go all the way down through my last name. So it adds in my G6 through my G52, which once again, I should have named that range so I don't have to keep going back and selecting it. But that's the range that I want to get the actual value answer from. I'm not going to do the rest of the arguments. I'm going to Control Enter, and it automatically, I did last name. I wanted first name. Sorry, that's H. So I'm going to get rid of the G and change that to be an H. So it's going to change the answer to give the first name based on that employee ID I looked up. So let me recap on that formula. So basically what the XLOOKUP does is it has a lookup value, which we wanted to look up the employee ID. But in all essence, an XLOOKUP can look up any column. Didn't have to be the first column of our range of data. And we told it we wanted to find that employee ID in B6 through B52. The answer we wanted was the first name. So all we have to do is tell it the range of cells that it's going to find the answer in. And that was H6 through H52. So it automatically found the first name. Now, this XLOOKUP has a lot more that it can do. Because if you stop and think about it, we had to do a separate formula for the last name, a separate formula for the first name. We would have to do another separate formula for the department. But what if you want to find their department, their data hire, their degree, their salary, their last name, their first name, and their initials. You want to find all of that information by looking up that employee ID number. We can do all of those in one formula with the XLOOKUP. Over in column K, I have the headings copied over for the department through the initials. I'm going to start on K2 and do an XLOOKUP and tell it I want to look up that employee ID number, but the answers are going to automatically populate for each one of these column headings all at one time. Let me show you how this one works. I'm going to do equal the letter X again to start my XLOOKUP. I'm going to double click the XLOOKUP. My lookup value is going to be B2, comma, it wants to know the lookup range or the lookup array. That's still going to be column B. So I want to select B6 down through B52, comma, it wants to know the return array. The return array is going to be multiple columns in a row. So what I want to do is select C6 across through I6 and then do Shift Control down arrow to select that entire range. Now, once again, I could have named it. That's all I wanted. Control Enter, and it's going to automatically populate the answers for everything in those columns just for that employee ID. Now, the data hire needs to be formatted, but that's a minor thing. But it automatically gave us their department, their data hire. They didn't have a degree. They had a salary, first name, last name, and the initials. So an XLOOKUP can do multiple formulas at one time. Highly recommend reading through the additional information that I gave you in your handout starting on page 5 of using these lookups, and take a look to see how you could be taking advantage of using that XLOOKUP. Give it some practice. It is, to me, my #1 lookup function. I don't use the other lookup functions anymore. And it even includes error code capability. It can also, if we put in a wrong employee ID number, the XLOOKUP function has it built in that if that item isn't found, we can put in what we want for the error message. So definitely check all that out. But let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of other functions. And by the way, with those if functions and with the lookups, I did give you some examples of using those in your handout. So I wanted to make sure that you had some other examples to kind of fall back on once you go back and practice. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about was some date functions. We have a lot of date formulas that can be used in Excel. I'm going to go to the dates worksheet for this first example. And on this dates worksheet, we have a list of employees. And one of the functions that I use on a pretty regular basis is called the year function. There's really about 22 different date functions available in Excel. I'm going to have Excel find the years of service based on the employee's date of hire. So this is another list of employees, which I could have used the last list, but this is a list of employees. They have a date of hire, and in column F, I want the computer to find the years of service for each employee. What I wanted to do is to use two different date functions. We're going to use the year function so that the answer comes back in years instead of days. And I'm going to use a function called today. The today function will automatically look at our computer's date, whatever your current date is. So on F4, I'm going to do equal the letter Y. Start with equal the letter Y. I'm going to use the year function where all it wants to know is what is the date you want me to look at the year of. That's going to actually be the today function. I want it to look at today. So I'm going to type TO. I'm going to double click today, and notice the today function needs a left paren, because of course every function needs the left paren, and it needs a right paren. So I'm adding the right paren there are no arguments because it's reading it from your computer date. So basically right now I've said equal, I want the year out of today's date. I need to put in one more right paren to close out the year function. Another right paren to close out the year function. Then I'm going to do a minus. I'm going to do minus year, the Y again, the function year. I'm going to double click Y, or I should say double click year. And this time I want it to grab the year from D4, the first employee's data hire. I'm going to close that out with a right paren. So if you look at the formula, basically it says take the year from today's date, subtract the year from their data hire. I'm going to control enter, and it comes back with a date answer. Does that by default because we were using a date formula. But all I have to do is go to the Home tab, go to the number group, click on the drop down, and choose short date. Or I don't want it to stay a date. I apologize for that. I meant general. I want to format it as general so that I get the years of service instead of a formatted date as the answer. So I can see this first person has been with the company for 40 years. I can copy this formula down for the other employees because I use the year with the today's date. They're all an absolute reference. So I'm going to double click so it copies that formula down for all of the other employees. So great way to take advantage of multiple formulas to get us to the answer that we needed. There are, of course, lots of other date type functions that you can use. I explained a couple of other ones in your handout. With the time that we have today, of course, I don't have time to cover all of those, but definitely check out the 22 different options you have if you work with dates at all. But there's something else that I want to talk about when it comes to this worksheet that we have. There is a feature built into Excel called a flash fill. Flash fill works based on patterns that we give the computer. And what I want to do is have the computer look at column G. In column G, we have office information, and it includes the name of their building, a code like the 02, and then the last 4 digits is their phone extension. In column H, I want to have the computer fill in with the flash fill all of the extensions coming from column G. I'm going to give it the first one so it knows the pattern I want it to follow. So I'm going to type 2099 on H4, and I'm going to do Control Enter to stay on that cell. So I give it the first one. So if I look at column G, the last 4 numbers was 2099. I did the Control Enter to stay on that cell because I have to be on the cell that has the value I want it to look for the pattern of going across that row. Now I'm going to go to the Data tab of the ribbon, and in the Data Tools group, I'm going to click the icon Flash Fill. It looks at the value that was on the cell, and it says, hey, I see that number to the left of me. I think you want me to fill that all in. And that's correct, I did. So it automatically filled all those extensions coming from column G here in column H. Pretty cool that it can follow our pattern. But let's see how cool it really is. Let's go to I4, and we want to grab out of column G. We want the name of the building they're in. Lab, Central, Central, HQ, etc. We need to give it the first one. I'm going to type lab, L-A-B. I'm going to Control Enter to stay on that cell. I'm simply going to click my flash fill again. It's going to notice my pattern, automatically fills them all the way down. It knew not to include just 3 characters like lab was only 3 characters. It knew to stop before the dash. So it fills in exactly what we needed. It's pretty smart. But let's see how smart it really is. I'm going to go to column A. And starting on A4, I want to fill in their first and last names of each employee. Notice we have in column B the last name, column C we have the first name, and notice they're uppercase. What I want in column A is first name space last name, and I want them to be proper casing. I'm going to type the first one in to give the computer the pattern, then I'm going to use flash fill. So I'm going to type in Erica space Decker, and I'm typing only a capital for the first letters of both names, so it's proper casing. I'm going to control enter, and I'm going to click flash fill again. It will follow your pattern and do all of the names, combining them together and following the casing that we gave it. So however you typed it in, it's going to follow that casing. You may not have noticed this, but in column I did a lowercase l for lab. So it did all of the buildings in lowercase because that's what I gave it as my pattern. So this flash fill feature is a great way to be able to analyze your data and be able to really pull things out of a cell or combine things together. So great option to use. But we're going to run out of time here real quick, so I want to jump to another topic that we have in your handout today, and that's going to be on page 11, sorting and filtering your data. I use sorting and filtering on a very regular basis. What I mean by that is if you want to sort information, and I'm actually going to go to the worksheet called sales. Well, actually, I'll go to subtotal pivot. I'll go to the subtotal pivot worksheet, where we have a bunch of company orders. It's the company name, what country the company is in, and all this other detail. And I want to be able to sort, and let's say I want to sort by the salesperson's name. I can click on any cell in that column for salesperson. And one way to sort is from the data tab of the ribbon. I can simply click the icon AZ. It will automatically sort my entire list, leaving the headings intact at the top. It sorts by the salesperson's names. So all of Andrew Fuller comes first, etc., going down. Matthew, did we have a question?
It's someone's working with the last function you just explained. They're wondering, will that work for last names with multiple names, i.e. Smith Thompson or Smith-Thompson, etc.?
That is a wonderful question. The answer is yes and no. Sorry. It kind of depends on what you have for the first one. Because if you put in let's say that the first one is Brittany Joe. If I put in Brittany Joe and then the last name of Reen, and I put in Brittany Joe Reen, it will follow that pattern all the way down. But if the first person was only Brittany and it didn't have the Joe, but somebody else did, it won't follow it correctly. So it's got this little tweaking thing that it needs to have additional information about it. So.
Okay. So.
All depends.
Yeah. Okay.
It can and it can't.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There is an alternative to that, though. You could actually use the concatenate function, and it will take whatever is in the cell. So if I had Brittany Joe, but the next one didn't have a second name, it wouldn't matter. It would automatically follow. Just so you know, use concatenate instead. Okay. But back to our sorting and filtering. All I had to do was click on a cell within that column, and I could sort this entire list, and everything in the row stays together. But if you're going to be doing a lot of sorting, you most likely want to also turn on your filters, because filters and sorting kind of go together. Filters allow us to limit the information of what it is that we want to see within a range. So this particular worksheet already has the filters turned on. I simply went to the data tab, clicked the filter icon, and it gave me these drop down arrows for each of my headings going across the top. So let's say that I only want to see orders that were placed in Canada. I could go to the country column, click on that drop down arrow. It's going to show me a unique list of all of the countries. I can uncheck the select all and click Canada, and then just click OK. I now am only seeing the orders that were placed with companies in Canada. And notice the left-hand side, it shows the row numbers. It's hiding all the other ones, basically. And down at the bottom left of your status bar, it tells you there is a total of 75 records that match the criteria out of a total of 1,464 total records. So it's pretty cool that we get that. But what if I don't want to see just Canada? I want to unfilter. One way, go back to the drop down for the filter for Canada and clear filter from country. That will bring back all of the records of information again. Now, sorting is available also from that drop down. So if I go to the order date as an example, and I click on the drop down arrow for order date, at the very top, you can see sorting. Sorting oldest to newest or newest to oldest. So you can use sorting from your filter also. So very common to do that. But what if you have a list like this and you scroll down on this list? What's happening as you scroll down is you no longer see the top heading. So I can't see which column is which. I don't know for sure what is what. Unless I scroll back up, I can then see the column headings. Well, you may be familiar with a feature called freeze panes. Freeze panes allows you to freeze columns and rows so that as you scroll up and down or left and right, it will automatically view the frozen columns or rows. But you know what? I usually, in a list like this, I'm usually going to want to be sorting, filtering. I want to freeze my top row. I might want to create additional formulas and things like that. Well, instead of me manually doing all of this, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to turn off my filter. I'm going to uncheck filter right now, so I don't even have the filter on. Because I personally, when I have a list of data like this, I know I'm going to want to do a whole bunch of other analysis with it. I want it to be ready for me to do all that with one click, instead of me having to freeze panes, turn on my filtering and sorting, that kind of thing. Instead, turn it into a table. By turning your range of data into a table, you get a lot of benefits. Let me show you. And by the way, I wouldn't even have to have row 1 formatted. If I select my headings in row 1, I could actually clear the formatting. So I don't even have anything formatted because the table will also do formatting. Matthew, let me get to your question before I do this.
That was my thoughts exactly. The question was, I always have problems when using sorting. Let's say I sort the order date, col.e, then sort the unit pricing, col.h again. Somehow the data will mess up. How do I properly sort multiple columns?
Well, one thing that you want to do is make sure you have your filter turned on. That's going to help because then or have it in a table, because then it's going to know your range of cells. Because if one of your columns does have a blank row, or if your data has a blank column, it's not going to sort right because it doesn't understand it's all in a range. So make sure it's all in a range together. And what you're going to want to do is a custom sort. Custom sort can be done from the data tab of the ribbon by clicking on the sort icon, where the first thing you're going to do is add in the column you want to sort by first. So if I wanted to sort by order date first, I'm going to choose order date and I'm going to choose newest to oldest or oldest to newest. Then I'm going to add a level to say I want to now sort by quantity or unit price or whichever one. I'll say quantity. And I want the quantity to be by largest to smallest. Now, anytime you're doing two sets of basically numbers, it may not come out exactly the way that you might be thinking, because first it's going to sort by that order date. So it's going to show all of the orders with the same date. Then it's going to look at that other column and put them with the largest number. Then it's going to go to the next date. Then it's going to have those largest numbers, etc. So if I click OK right now, it sorts based on that order that I just told it. So based on here's all the December 31st. And then in the unit, or I did based on quantity, you can see the quantity has the highest numbers for those. Then it went to the December 30th. And then if I look at the quantity, it did exactly what I told it to do. So sometimes we have to understand what the computer does by default. So I hope that helped. But what I want to go back and do with this data is turn it into a table. So I'm going to get a whole bunch of features with one option. To do that, I'm going to go to the Insert tab. I'm going to click on the icon table. And I'm going to just click OK because it automatically recognized my range of data. And it has a check mark for my data having headers, which means the top row is the headings. Once you click OK, it automatically applies a formatted color to the header and a different every other row color. And it turned on my sorting and filtering in row 1. And if I scroll down, it froze row 1. How do I know that? Well, if I look up the top, it doesn't say column A, B, C, D. It actually froze the names of the columns. So it says company name, country, salesperson, order ID, etc. going across the top. And we have a new tab on the ribbon to help us work inside this table. It's called the Table Design tab. From there, we can change the formatting of our table by clicking on the drop down. I'm going to choose this color. So I have every other record in a different gray shaded color. Makes it so much easier to understand the data. And it has this green going across the top. This every other row is called banded rows. So it automatically has that as a check mark here on the ribbon in this table style options group. If I uncheck banded rows, it removes that formatting from every other row. Check it again, it comes back. So just so you know, you can use the tools from the tab on the ribbon to control what happens within this table. But what if I wanted to add a new column of data to this table? I want to see a 10% discount of the extended price. I'm going to go to K1 and I'm going to type in discount, and then I'm going to go to K2 and create a formula. I'm going to do equal extended price multiplied by 10%. And I'm going to press my enter key. Because it's part of a table, it assumed I want that column to be a part of the table. It automatically did the formula and copied it all the way down to every row within this table. So adding formulas to the table is much easier also. So if you're not currently working with tables, tables have tons of benefits. Highly recommend using tables so you get multiple features with one option instead of manually applying all those features. And then very quickly in our last couple of minutes here, there is some information about using Excel tables that starts on page 14 of your handout. If I'm in, and I'm just going to jump back to the references worksheet, a very common feature in Excel is to use charts. Charts are a visual representation of your data that otherwise you may not be able to see or might not be able to understand the data quite as easily. So what I want to do is I want to select A4 through, let me do A4 through E9, A4 through E9. I want to turn that range of data into a column chart or whatever kind of chart you might want. When you select a range of data, you can actually then go to the ribbon. Somehow I lost my mouse here, sorry. Lost my mouse pointer. That's kind of weird that it's doing that. It's kind of hiding my mouse on me. Oops, sorry. Oh, I really lost my mouse. Let me bring my mouse back over here. Slide it back over, see if I can get my mouse to work. I get back here. Oh, for some reason, my mouse has totally disappeared. But anyway, when you are selected on a range of cells, it automatically will allow you, and I'm going to say, there, I got my mouse back. I shrunk my screen down to cheat a little bit here. But basically, let me maximize that back out. Once you select your range, go to the Insert tab, click Recommended Charts so that it will show you charts that it recommends in Excel based on the data you selected. It will show you a list on the left-hand side that you can go up and down those and see a preview of it before you choose it. But when you're ready to create the chart, just click OK. It will automatically put a chart in the middle of your worksheet. So this chart is directly connected to the data that I had selected. So if that data changes, the chart will automatically update. But you have two tabs on the ribbon related to working with that chart. You can see there is a chart design tab up at the top, and there is a format tab. You can use the chart design to change the formatting or to add different elements to your chart, because there's a lot of additional things that are available with working with these charts. The chart is an object on top of your cells, so you can actually click the chart and move it. Once again, my mouse disappeared on me. I was going to see if I can get it to, and I don't have a touch screen on that monitor. Sorry, mouse is really being strange. I don't know what's going weird on my computer today, but let me just close that here real quick. On that chart design tab, or here I can click and drag and move this. I can be using any of these tools to modify that object. It sits on top of the cell, so it can be moved by clicking and dragging it anywhere you need it to go.